The crew of the Enterprise is afflicted by a mysterious infection that strips away their inhibitions, and you know what that means! Overacting contest! Also, a lot of this here. This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Naked Time. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what happens in it, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. So, by this point in the series, the crew of the Enterprise has faced the threats of an alien salt vampire in the Man-Trap and 2 consecutive godlike beings, Charlie and Charlie X and Gary Mitchell in Where No Man Has Gone Before, the second pilot, which was aired as the 3rd episode. They've overcome those obstacles and lived to explore strange new worlds another day, but how will they fare when they come up against the challenge of Space Cooties? The Enterprise is orbiting Psi 2000, an ancient planet that is in the process of breaking up. Their mission is to pick up the science team that's been posted to the planet's surface and then hang around and watch the planet tear itself apart. Sounds like fun and pretty straightforward, but matters are complicated when Spock and Lieutenant Joe Tormelin beam down in their adorably low-budget isolation suits and find the base where the scientists were stationed to be completely frozen and all the scientists dead. Not just dead, but dead in some very unusual circumstances. There's a woman on the floor who's been strangled to death. One guy is just slumped over at a console. Another, we're told, is frozen in a shower with all of his clothes on. What happened to these people? And why'd they turn off their environmental systems and let themselves freeze to death in the first place? All very good questions, which Spock intends to investigate. When he leaves the room to check the rest of the base, Joe removes one of his gloves to scratch his nose, and while his hand is exposed, a drop of space water decides to hitch a ride. Hilariously, the moment after this happens, Spock returns to sternly warn Joe not to expose himself to anything. Great timing, Spock. They beam back to the Enterprise and are thoroughly decontaminated and examined by Dr. McCoy, but I don't know. Joe, he don't seem right. Kirk meets with Spock, McCoy, and Scotty to discuss the situation. Despite the mysterious deaths of the science team, they still have orders to observe and record the disintegration of the planet. This means the ship will have to maintain a close orbit and will require regular adjustments as the planet's gravity continues to shift. In other words, it's just about the worst time imaginable for the entire crew to suddenly lose their minds. In the dining hall or wherever, Joe has just sat down to enjoy his TV dinner when Sulu and Riley come in. Sulu is trying to convince Riley to take up fencing and asks Joe what he thinks. And Joe's like, we shouldn't even be in space. We're not doing any good out here. We're just polluting everything. If man was meant to be in space, he wouldn't need to breathe air. And Sulu's like, right, okay, but seeing as we're out here already and the ship has a gym, what do you think, fencing? Then Joe stabs himself, which I honestly have no idea how to interpret that relative to the fencing argument. Is he for or against taking up fencing as a hobby? We may never know. Sulu and Riley return to their stations on the bridge, while McCoy performs surgery on Joe with salt shakers and a blowtorch. Shockingly, Joe dies. McCoy blames the patient, telling Kirk, I think he just gave up. It definitely wasn't my fault. Sulu, who like Riley has been infected by space cooties from Joe, decides to leave work early and invites Riley to join him in the gym for some exercise, but Riley declines. Another orbital shift occurs and Sulu isn't at his station to compensate. Spock takes care of it himself, then demands to know where Sulu is. Riley, whose space cooties have abruptly kicked in, is like, doo-ti-doo-ti-doo. Spock's like, no being extra Irish on the bridge, report to sickbay. So Riley skips down to sickbay, learns that Joe is on a slab, and gives space cooties to Nurse Chapel before turning around and leaving. Meanwhile, Sulu has decided he's tired of hiding his light under a bushel and is going to let everyone on the ship see the benefits of fencing firsthand. I know this scene has become such a meme that we don't really think about it anymore, but can we just take a moment to appreciate how ripped George Takei is here? Nowadays, every actor between the ages of like 18 and 60 is expected to appear ludicrously jacked on screen at all times, but this was the 60s, when not all actors were physically fit, and those that were just physically fit like a normal person would be. For Sulu to come leaping out of the turbolift, shirtless, looking like Bruce Lee after a 3-day water fast, George had to be putting in some work. and I respect that. Sulu makes it to the bridge, where he menaces Kirk with his sword and pulls Uhura to his side, promising, "I'll protect you, fair maiden," which tees up Uhura for maybe her best line of the whole series, "Sorry, neither," which only confirms what we all should have suspected, that Uhura can and does get laid whenever she goddamn feels like it. Spock drops Sulu with a neck pinch and they take him to sickbay. Meanwhile, Riley has locked himself in main engineering and has taken over control of the ship, declaring himself to be captain, issuing ship-wide orders such as girls should wear their hair down and take it easy on the makeup, and endlessly warbling, "I'll take you home again, Kathleen." Scotty starts cutting through the wall so they can get in and be able to fly the ship away from the crumbling planet they're being inextricably pulled toward, and Spock arrives to tell Scotty to hurry it the hell up. Spock then drops by sickbay so that Nurse Chapel can do some sad flirting and give him space cooties. As he feels the space cooties taking hold, Spock's like, "Oh, is this an overacting contest? You people haven't seen overacting yet." And he staggers along the corridor to an empty room and has himself a little breakdown. Kirk and Scotty finally break into engineering and drag Riley away, but discover to their horror that Riley has completely shut down the engines, meaning there isn't enough time to restart them and move the ship to safety before the planet disintegrates and the Enterprise is torn apart along with it. There's an extremely small chance they could start the engines cold and still get away in time, but they'd need the precise formula to balance the matter and antimatter and blah 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 technobabble. Hey, Spock's good at this sort of thing. I'll go see if he wants to. Oh shit. Kirk finds Spock still in the middle of his Vulcan pity party. He tells Spock about the seriousness of their situation, but Spock's all, "I never told my mother that I loved her." Kirk's like, "What the fuck? I respected my father, our Vulcan ways. I was ashamed of my human side." And Kirk's like, "I didn't ask to hear your life story," and starts slapping the shit out of him. Spock returns fire, backhanding Kirk across the table and giving Kirk space cooties in the process. And Kirk rises to his feet like, "You fucks think you've seen overacting yet? Stand clear and watch." And then Kirk goes off about how Spock's better off without emotions because as captain, Kirk isn't allowed to be in love or hold hands and walk on beaches with girls. It's all about the ship. He can't live his life. He's got to live hers. Shatner's overacting as Kirk is so powerful that it forms an irresistible gravity well that draws the space cooties out of Spock, so that by the time Scotty shows up to see what the hell is taking so long, Spock is totally fine and has even thought of a formula they can use to restart the engines and save the ship. So they head to engineering. Kirk pulls himself together and heads to the bridge where McCoy is waiting with a cure for the space cooties that he developed in a couple of scenes I didn't mention. Also, Sulu is back at work since he was the first one cured. Sadly, they made him put his shirt back on. Spock and Scotty get the engines running, the Enterprise pulls away from the planet, and they wind up going so fast that they actually travel back in time. They're 3 days in the past when they finally stopped. Spock's like, "So we can time travel now? Maybe we'll do that every once in a while?" And Kirk's like, "Yeah, probably, but let's never do it in this exact way ever again." And the Enterprise sails on to its next adventure, presumably arriving 3 days early, and that's the end. So this batch of reviews will be dedicated to bottle episodes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, a bottle episode is a show which uses only standing sets and doesn't feature any expensive guest stars. Bottle shows are designed to be cheap and quick to shoot, to save money and time if other episodes in the production schedule have taken up too much of each. The Naked Time takes place almost entirely on the Enterprise itself, and the only important characters not part of the established regular and recurring cast are Stuart Moss as Joe and Bruce Hyde as Riley, neither of whom were stars, and one of whom, Riley, went on to become a recurring character, though only just barely. He shows up in one more episode after this. Bottle episodes can be fun because their limitations force the writers to be creative when crafting the scenario, and The Naked Time is an excellent example of that. Written by John D.F. Black, who was also an associate producer on the series, the script keeps things interesting by telling its story using 3 simple and interconnected plot lines. the ever-increasing peril of the Enterprise being pulled toward the disintegrating planet, the spread of the space cooties, and McCoy's discovery of and efforts to cure the space cooties. All three plots emerge naturally and logically from the situation, and they all converge at the end. The nature of the space cooties threat even allows the episode to make something of a virtue out of one of classic Trek's most inexorable vices, its slow pacing. For the first half, that unhurried pace works, rendering the revelation and spread of the space cooties infection as a slow burn. Once the infection has taken hold and the heroes have realized what's going on, the pace quickens, the threat of the disintegrating planet kicks in, and the tension starts to rise. In terms of basic storytelling execution, it's one of the best TOS episodes. Another smart thing Black's script does is to stage the spread of the infection so that the most important characters on the show are the last ones we see affected by it. Spock and Kirk don't catch it until near the end of the episode, when the stakes are at their highest and when we've been waiting almost an hour to watch Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner get to cut loose and start chewing the scenery. And in both cases, it is very much worth the wait. Nimoy plays Spock's breakdown straight and does as good a job with it as anyone probably could have, but the heightened nature of the scene and the inherent silliness of the underlying situation make it impossible for me to take too seriously. It does give us some insight into Spock, allowing us one of our first peeks behind the veil, showing us how much strong emotion the apparently unfeeling science officer is keeping under control, and it's a superbly directed scene. Credit to Mark Daniels, one of classic Trek's most prolific directors. I love the camera move that tracks behind Spock as he turns away, catching his anguished face on the other side. But the scene is still a hoot to me. I can't help it. Yet, it is but an appetizer before the main course of Shatner getting to ham it up once he enters and gets the space cooties smacked into him. Shatner has several memorable overacting moments throughout the run of classic Trek. Obviously, he's Shatner, and this is one of his best ones. His sudden tone shifts, his convulsive body movements, his unrestrained emoting. It's ham with a side of ham on a plate made of ham, served in a restaurant located inside a hollowed-out Shatner head carved from a massive ham. And I couldn't love it more. As is usually the case, even with the best episodes, the naked time isn't perfect. Though overall the pacing is excellent, it does threaten to bog down here and there. Riley's stay in main engineering and Scotty's effort to cut through the door begin to drag before they're over. And because this is such an early episode in the series run, 6th produced and 4th broadcast, some of the character traits feel arbitrarily assigned. When Spock says that Sulu began darting through the ship with his foil because he is a swashbuckler at heart, we just kind of have to accept that, because we don't know anything about Sulu other than his name and that he's the guy who flies the ship. If Sulu had instead been seen chasing crewmen through the ship with a whip and a chair, and Spock had explained, "He's always dreamed of being a lion tamer in one of your Earth circuses," it would have made just as much sense. The swashbuckler bit referring to Sulu is odd for another reason. We don't need it. Sulu running around with a sword is already set up through his conversation with Riley earlier on when he discusses the benefits of fencing. When Sulu catches space cooties and starts running around with a sword, it makes sense because we know he likes to fence, and we know the cooties make you goofy and uninhibited. Having Spock say, "It's because he's a swashbuckler," reads as a random extra explanation for something that's already been explained. Anyway, those are minor flaws, all things considered. This isn't just a bottle episode, it's a give the actors an excuse to go apeshit episode, and those are nearly always a fun watch. What makes The Naked Time one of classic Trek's best shows is how it's able to combine its overtly silly elements with a genuinely well-crafted and suspenseful story, and do it in such a way that the silliness actually amplifies the suspense. Will our heroes be able to get their heads together in time to save themselves? Or will they, like those frozen scientists on Psi 2000, succumb to the plague of space cooties? Terrific bottle episode, terrific episode, period. Those are my thoughts on the Naked Time. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as this brand new batch of retro reviews continues. Next time, it's another bottle episode, this time from Star Trek The Next Generation, Where Silence Has Lease. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.